That's true. Naked Palpatine.
Oh, you picked that one. Fresh out of the clone tank, nude Palpatine is my
That's the first thing I think of when you say Dark Empire Palpatine.
Hello everybody and welcome back to the Star Wars Expanded Universe, narrated by Disney, or Lucasfilm, whichever way you slice it, Legends. Been a while since I got to say that one, but we're back and better than ever. Last time I did this like 2 years ago and reviewed this trilogy, I just reviewed it in one overall video of the franchise. But in this reread, I am doing the videos individually, with each book individually, so a little bit more in-depth, because I think I just did the overall story of the trilogy, but now I'm going book by book. So this will be slightly different than the last time. This is Black Fleet Crisis, Book 1, Before the Storm, by Michael P. something McDowell. So, only other McDowell I know of is from Apologetics, but we're not getting into that today. It's a whole separate thing. But yeah, did I enjoy this book? I still did. It's a bit slower than I remember. I mean, I remember it being slow, but it is a slow book. If you're expecting heavy action, you're going to be very disappointed. This book is slow. And I think there's only two ways about it. You either will relatively enjoy it. It's not going to be your favorite thing ever. You either enjoy it, like I did, or you're going to be extremely bored by this story. And there's really no two ways or buts about it. This is a mostly political threat in this book. There'll be more action down the line, but there's kind of three separate storylines that are going on at this time. So we'll go from worst to best. There are two subplots and one main plot. The main plot revolves around Leia Organa Solo, but there's two subplots revolving around Lando and Luke Skywalker. So the subplot with Luke is one of the B plots, and Luke is having what seems to be a midlife crisis. There are some things discussed in this book which are really interesting. The idea is that Luke doesn't know what his place should be anymore within the galaxy. He sees himself getting quite powerful, and he comes up with this idea while talking to Han that perhaps, you know, Obi-Wan and Yoda went into hiding not because they were on the run from the Empire trying to hide, but because they were getting too powerful and they needed to either choose to be in the moment and fight or to run away forever. It's an interesting things that they discuss there, but it just doesn't hold much water. It's interesting, but ultimately I hate this direction for the same reason I hate The Last Jedi. Or, well, one of the things I hate about The Last Jedi, Luke runs away. And I won't be a hypocrite. The reason I'm mentioning The Last Jedi is because it's relevant to this. I'm not a hypocrite, and I will call it out when it happens in Legends as well. Luke goes and tries to become a hermit for a bit. He's just going to stay away from his family and his responsibilities. And I think that's stupid, and I think that's dumb. Of course, what gets him out of that in this story is the allure. There is this lady. I forget her name, I didn't write it down. But she is from the Falanasi Jedi Order sect, which is another offshoot of the main Jedi Order we see in the prequels. You know, so we have Callista's offshoot, and there's the Falanasi offshoot, and we have the Janissari that was talked about in I, Jedi and stuff like that. So different, you know, small Jedi Force factions, and the Falanasi are one of them. The most important thing about the Falanasi is down the line, that will be one of the things that Jason Solo learns from. But that's really it. But anyway, so Luke goes on a journey with her. It begins a journey with her in this book. It'll be explored more in the other two. Because she claims to know about his mother. Which, of course, we all know his mother's Padme Amidala. But this book, the allure for him is that he's being told he can learn more about his mother. Is that true? Is it a red herring? You have to read the other two books to find out. But that's essentially Luke's story, and it's the weakest of the bunch, and I don't really care for it. onward from that, we have the second story that's another B plot that is almost nothing at all to do with the main plot, but it is really fun. In fact, I would even deem this to be, within this trilogy, it's essentially like having a small fourth book in the Lando Calrissian trilogy by L. Neil Smith. That's how good it is. But it feels very, if you know the movie Alien, where they go into the spaceship and you're like, what is this? Like, just the fear of the unknown, not knowing what it is you're getting into. There is this ship, this old ship named the Vagabond. And Lando Calrissian goes on an adventure because he is bored and wants to do something fun. So he takes C-3PO and Lobot. Yes, the freaking dude with the things in his head that's in episode 5. We get more Lobot, which this book gets major props for that. But it's basically just this huge mystery adventure. Does the mystery really hold weight once we get the conclusion? I don't know. We'll see when we get to the other 2 books. I'm imagining it doesn't, and that's what kind of makes it all fizzle out. But judging this book alone, just on this book, the mystery it builds up is actually really interesting, and I find the adventure so far really, really, really fun. And then the main plot, my favorite part of this entire book, which is Leia's plot with the Yvethan. Now, the Yvethan, we get introduced, there is, the opening chapter of this book is a flashback to back when the Empire was still in charge, and how the Yvethan were slaves to the Empire, because of course the Empire doesn't like aliens. But they were, helping with this shipyard, and at some point they revolt, and the Yvetha have these, like, little knife things that pop out of their, like, right over it. Kind of like Spider-Man goes like this in the Sam Raimi movies, except that a big giant freaking needle pops out, like a sword stabs you. So, they massacre all the Imperials, and they take over the shipyard. Then we jump ahead to the current day, where we get to see what's up with our main characters and everything, and then we get into all the politics, which, if you don't like politics in the prequels, you're going to hate this trilogy, because there's a lot of politics in here. A lot of talking, a lot of debating. It's actually really interesting, though. And Neil Spar is a representative of the Yvethan people, and Leia keeps talking to him and trying, make peace and try to bring them into the Republic and all that, even though, Neil Spar says, I want nothing to do with that, we just want to be left alone. And so all that culminates, in the end, to where it seems to me, at least, I'm pretty sure this is the case, that they just want to make Leia seem to be in a bad light. Because another interesting thing about this book, I'm trying not to get into my spoiler section yet, but another interesting part about this book is that it introduces the idea, I'm trying to say here. Right. So Crimson Empire 3 is the first time I remember seeing within an actual material that, it might have just been the government at that time, not the whole general populace, but, people knew that Luke and Leia were Vader's kids. But now it is common knowledge across the galaxy, across known space, that Luke and Leia in this trilogy are the children of Darth Vader. And that causes a lot of political upheaval for Leia, because now it's like, well, you're the daughter of the guy that murdered billions, and we're meant to trust you, so stuff like that, like stuff that wasn't an issue before is now being brought into question because of her family line. So there's that. But overall, it is a slow book, I'll say that for sure, but I had a lot of fun with this. I found the main story really intriguing and really engaging. I have some issues with Leia. I'll get with that in my spoiler section, but overall, I think this first book is pretty solid. But I say it's like the greatest thing ever and you need to read it? No, because in the grand scheme, this trilogy does not matter that much. The Fallen Nazi are a thing that's important to the future of the EU, and the Yvetha will pop up for a second in New Jedi Order, but they're not that important. So you don't really need this trilogy to understand New Jedi Order. Of course, if you read this trilogy, you'll be like, oh, it's the Yvetha, but you don't need it to really enjoy that aspect of the story. But that being said, does it fumble down the line? I don't know. We'll see. But as for this first book, I really, really enjoyed it, and I do highly, highly recommend Black v. Crisis Book 1. I think it's a solid book, and all the politics and stuff in it, I really enjoy about it. So definitely think it's a thumbs up from me. There's also, before I get into spoilers, there's so many. The highlight of this book, beyond just the political stuff, is the small moments, the downtime. Michael P. McDowell is really good at these small human moments. Like Han hanging out with the kids. Or Leia and Han talking about something. Or Luke and Leia talking about something. Or Luke and Streen talking about something. On and on. The little conversations that, don't advance the plot and aren't like super dramatic, that are just normal conversations that build that family dynamic and build that relationship, are just really well done. Like, it just feels really natural and normal and human. I like Akbar in X-Wing. I like Akbar in the Jedi Academy trilogy. I'm going to be honest, I think it's this book that made me really fall in love with him, or this trilogy, as I'm rereading it. Akbar gets a lot of love so far in this first book, and I'm hoping he gets more love down the line, because Akbar is the best. He's way more than just a talking fish head now. He is an actual character, and I love Akbar. But yeah, I'm going to get into spoilers now. If you don't want spoilers, now's the time to get out. Otherwise, I'll see you for book 2. So, there is a scene between Luke and Streen, where Luke discusses, he doesn't think he can be training people anymore. He's got to figure things out. He's having his midlife crisis, and he asks Streen to take over. And I thought that entire scene was done very well. I like Streen. This book also connects a lot to the EU, more than I remembered. And it's actually really refreshing to see how much he references. He probably references the most out of anybody so far, McDowell does. Chewbacca goes to see his family. So Chewbacca kind of gets written out of the story, but it's still nice, because again, the little moments, Leia's like, Han, he's always with you, always takes care of us. Let him go see his family for a little bit. So part of the thing with this book is that the Millennium Falcon is unable to be used at all. The titular ship of the franchise, the Millennium Falcon. It can't be used because Chewbacca was allowed to use the Millennium Falcon to, fly on back to Kashyyyk so he could go see Lumpy and Mala and all them for a little bit. And it's because of that, that Chewbacca's just not around, along with the Millennium Falcon being gone for this story. There's just a little thing, but Akbar calls Leia's kids little fishes, his little fish, and I just thought that was really cute and adorable. There's also strong connections to Crystal Star, because one of the reasons that, at least at the beginning of this book, that Han's kind of taking on a stay-at-home dad kind of mentality is because the last story chronologically that we talked about, or at least one of the last stories we talked about, was the Crystal Star, where their kids were kidnapped. So now Han's trying to spend more time with his kids. So, it's a natural consequence of the previous story affecting this one. And I thought that was really well done. So, Luke and the Hermit thing. It's interesting how he describes it, how he talks about it, but it's such BS. With great power comes great responsibility, right? So just because you're gaining great power does not mean you just run away. And so the stupidest parts of this book, the fact that he's, even, considering all this, is like, and it's pretty obvious that Obi-Wan and Yoda were in hiding from the Emperor and Vader, not because they just thought they were too powerful or whatever. Like, that's stupid. Like, even just the OT, they're hiding because of the Empire. Because they would be killed if they were be out in the open. Obviously. But, it is whatever. It's fine. I just think, Luke is getting over Callista. He had this weird experience with Waru. Now he's going through a midlife crisis. And he's, because he's like 30-something years old now. He's still not married. Doesn't have kids. Leia and Han's kids are growing up, and they've been married, and Luke's like, when's it my shot? Which, unfortunately, still is not going to happen for him for a little bit. Tamara Jade finally pops the question. No, it's Luke who pops the question. Regardless, it's not going to happen for a little bit longer. But I think he's just, going through a midlife crisis, not knowing what he needs to do with his life, when clearly it's to just continue being a teacher to the new Jedi. Like how much more fulfilling, Like, yeah, I get it. I'm wanting a family. I completely get that. Not that that's really addressed in this book. This is me purely fixing stuff with him. Like, it doesn't really talk about him having a midlife crisis. It just seems to come across that way. Like, because that's how, like, stupid it seems to me that he would act this way. But yeah, I think he's going through a midlife crisis, and he doesn't know what to do with himself. So he's figuring that all out, and that's what the whole point of his story is. But I enjoyed the conversation with him and Han. It was interesting, and I enjoyed him and Han's dynamic and relationship in those scenes. It was, again, McDowell is super strong with these, like, little nuggets of character moments with each other. Like, it feels so real and so natural. But the overall, I find the concept fascinating, what he talks about, but it's ultimately just stupid and fluff. I don't agree with it. The last thing that I've heard other people complain about that may be the biggest deal is Leia herself. Leia's plot is my favorite thing about this book, but she comes off very stubborn because there's clearly some sus things going on with the Yavata people, and Akbar's telling her about it. Drayson from, the Thrawn Trilogy, she's telling her about it. Abbott, this new character that's introduced in this book, tells her about it. Nobody cares. Or she doesn't care. She just, no, he's good. And it is a bit out of character for her. I feel like it's making her a bit stupider than necessary. But I don't think the intention is just for her to be stupid or anything. I think the reason she's being so stubborn, again, goes back to the thing where everybody at this point in time knows that she's Vader's kid. And she's overcompensating. Right? She's like, stop. Do not think of me in that light. I'm not my father. If anything, I'm like Bail Organa Solo, who saw the good, or Bail Organa, who saw the goodness in everybody. This good man who was a pacifist for most of his life. Like, this good guy, And I think she's trying to find the good in the Yavethans because of that. She doesn't want to go straight to, like, offensive things or, taking the initiative because she doesn't want people to call her Vader's kid or, like, look at her being just as violent and powerful as Vader was by using her power to stomp out these people, I think she's just nervous about all that, and she's, just hoping to find the goodness in these people. But it is, again, it's a little stupid, but I do think it is a little bit justified why she's acting the way she is. It's clear that she's going through a lot of stress. Being the chief of state is not easy. She's been the chief of state since the Jedi Academy trilogy, and it's weighing on her. It's weighing on her a lot. And it's why I think either by the end of Hand of Thrawn or just the beginning of New Jedi Order, she stops. She stops being head of state. She can't take it anymore. She can't do it anymore. Unfortunately, we'll go to Borsk Fela, but again, like, she gets sick and tired of it, and it's weighing on her in this book really heavily. So it is a little bit of an issue, but I do overall accept it as what's going on. But like I said, overall, I think this book is really solid. I don't really do rankings or anything, but I think it's up there. It's not like one of the best EU books you'll ever read or anything, but I think it's far from the worst. I think it's a very solid book. Of course, Luke's plot's the weakest. Lando's plot seems virtually could have been in its own book. Like, it is kind of pointless to the overall main narrative, but at the same time, it's so fun, I don't care. I'm just glad we have it in the story, because it's so much fun. And we hardly ever get people, giving love to Lando, so I'm glad that McDowell did, So overall, I think it's a pretty solid book, and I'm excited to read Shield of Lies. So until next time, guys, may the Force be with you.